The wind moves across the reg in long, slow exhalations, carrying with it a fine dust that settles on everything. On the men, on the camels, on the rifles strapped to saddles, on the brass buttons of French uniforms that have long since lost their shine. The sun hangs white and absolute in a sky bleached of color, and beneath it the Sahara stretches in every direction, an ocean of stone and sand that offers no horizon, only the shimmering distortion of heat, bending light into shapes that do not exist. Of the 92 men who ride into the Ahaga in February 1881, 11 will return. The rest will vanish into reports written in careful handwriting and into sand that keeps no record. None of them know this yet. They ride with instruments calibrated, rifles cleaned, maps rolled and precise. They believe the future runs in straight lines like rails laid across obedient ground. Before the desert, there had been rooms with polished tables and unfolded maps. In Paris, lines were drawn across North Africa in clean ink, measured in kilometers and confidence. Speeches were made about progress and connection, about iron rails stitching distant territories into a single design. In Algiers, crates were loaded onto ships, instruments checked, uniforms brushed free of dust that did not yet exist. Some of the younger officers spoke of adventure, others spoke of promotion. None of them spoke of bones whitening beneath an indifferent sun. Colonel Paul Flatters rides at the head of the column, his back straight, his eyes fixed on the distance. He is 52 years old, a career officer of the French army, a man who has spent decades in Algeria and knows the desert as well as any European can claim to know it. Behind him ride 92 men, French officers, engineers, soldiers, and Chamba tribesmen who serve as guides and camel drivers. They move south through the Ahaga highlands, deeper into a territory that no European power has ever controlled, mapping a route for a railway that will one day connect Algeria to the French possessions in Sudan. That is the plan. That is the ambition. A steel line cutting through the heart of the Sahara, binding empire to empire across 1,000 kilometers of emptiness. It is February 1881, and the expedition has been traveling for months. They departed from Ouargla in December, loaded with supplies, instruments, weapons, and the confidence of men who believe that preparation and discipline can master any landscape. Flatters has led expeditions before. He understands the desert's indifference to human intention. But he also believes in the mission, in the civilizing power of iron rails and steam engines, in the inevitability of French expansion. He is not a reckless man. He is methodical, careful. But he is here, deep in Tuareg territory, and the Tuareg have not invited him. The Ahaga Tuareg have watched the expedition since it entered their lands. They have shadowed it from the ridges of black volcanic rock that rise like broken teeth from the sand. They have counted the men, the camels, the rifles. They have noted the route. They have sent messengers ahead and held councils in the shade of their tents. The French believe they are moving through empty space. The Tuareg know that no space in the desert is ever truly empty. Captain Masson rides alongside Flatters, scanning the terrain with an unease he cannot quite name. The landscape has changed. The wadis have grown narrower. The hills press closer. The guides seem nervous, their conversations quieter than before. Masson has mentioned this to the colonel, suggested perhaps they should alter course, but Flatters has dismissed the concern. They are close now to the well at Bir El Garama. Water is ahead. They will rest, resupply, and continue south. The sun reaches its apex and begins its slow descent. The shadows lengthen across the reg. The column moves forward, the rhythm of hooves on stone the only sound beneath the wind. Bir El Garama appears as a depression in the land, a place where the rock gives way to softer ground and the promise of water beneath the surface. The expedition halts, men dismount. Canteens are emptied in anticipation of refilling. The Chamba guides begin to unload equipment while the officers consult their maps. Flatters gives the order to make camp nearby, while a party is sent to verify the well's condition. The Tuaregs strike without warning. They emerge from the rocks in a wave of indigo and steel, their swords catching the afternoon light, their camels surging forward with a speed that seems impossible on such terrain. The first shots are fired before most of the French soldiers can reach their weapons. Flatters is hit almost immediately. He falls from his mount, his body crumpling against the sand. For several seconds, no one understands what has happened. The first shots echo like accidents, like misfires. A sergeant turns in his saddle, confused rather than afraid. Then the air fills with movement, shouting in a language most of them do not know, camels screaming, steel striking bone. Orders are attempted but never formed. The structure that held the column together collapses before the bodies do. Captain Masson turns to rally the men but is cut down within moments. Engineer Beringer, Dr. Gouard, they fall in quick succession, overwhelmed by the ferocity and precision of the attack. The ambush lasts only minutes, but it shatters the expedition's command structure entirely. When the Tuareg withdraw into the hills, carrying captured rifles and supplies, they leave behind a scene of carnage. Bodies lie scattered across the reg. Camels bray in panic. The survivors, perhaps 40 men, gather in stunned silence. Their officers dead or dying, their route south now impossible. Lieutenant de Dianos emerges from the chaos with a wound to his arm but his mind intact. He is young, relatively inexperienced, thrust into command by circumstance rather than design. He looks at the men around him, soldiers, engineers, guides, and understands immediately that survival is now the only objective. The railway survey is over. The mission is finished. What remains is the long march north, back through hundreds of kilometers of desert, with diminished supplies and enemies who will not allow them to pass unmolested. They bury what they can. They salvage what water remains. They gather the surviving camels and begin the retreat. The first days are a test of endurance. The Tuareg do not attack again immediately, but their presence is felt. Figures appear on distant ridges, watching. Shots ring out from hidden positions, wounding men at random, keeping the survivors in a constant state of fear. The heat is relentless. The water runs low. The camels begin to die, and with each one that falls, the expedition loses both transport and food. Dehydration is not a single event. It is a slow collapse of systems. The mouth dries first, the tongue thickens. Saliva becomes a memory. Then the headaches begin, pounding behind the eyes, making thought itself a form of pain. The skin loses elasticity. The heart races even at rest, struggling to pump blood that has grown thick and sluggish. Men begin to stumble. Some fall and cannot rise. Others continue walking through a haze that blurs the line between consciousness and dream. Sand grinds between teeth with every breath. It coats the inside of nostrils, the corners of eyes, the folds of clothing. It becomes inseparable from the body, as though the desert is slowly claiming them, particle by particle. The wind offers no relief. It carries only heat, pushing against the column like a hand, pressing them back into the emptiness they are trying to escape. The Tuareg return, not in force, but in small parties, striking at the edges of the column, picking off stragglers, wounding men who then become burdens to the rest. The survivors march through a landscape that offers no cover, no shade, no water. The wells they find are dry or poisoned. The food runs out. The camels are slaughtered one by one, their blood drunk before it can clot, their flesh consumed raw, because there is no fuel for fire. And then there are the dates. A group of Tuareg approaches under a flag of negotiation. They offer food-dried dates as a gesture of truce. The survivors are desperate. Some accept. The dates are contaminated with a desert plant that induces madness and convulsions. Men who eat them begin to hallucinate. They scream at phantoms. They attack their companions. Some die within hours, their bodies twisted, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. One man begins to laugh before the convulsions start. It is a high, brittle sound that does not belong in the desert. Another claws at his own throat as if something is trapped there. Didymus orders the dates thrown away, but the command comes too late. The poison does not merely weaken the body, it fractures perception. Companions become threats. Shadows take on intention. A soldier fires into the darkness at shapes only he can see. In the confusion, two men are stabbed not by Tuareg blades, but by hands that had shared rations days before. From that moment, The expedition is no longer a unit. It is a collection of frightened organisms moving in the same direction. The column fragments. Trust dissolves. Men who have marched together for months now eye each other with suspicion. The structure that held them, military hierarchy, shared purpose, mutual obligation, cracks and falls away. What remains is something more elemental. Survival stripped of pretense. Didianos tries to maintain order, but his authority diminishes with each passing day. The chamber guides begin to slip away at night, making their own way north, unwilling to share the fate of the French. Soldiers who once followed commands now act only in their own interest. The wounded are left behind. The dead are not buried. The living walk forward because stopping means death, even though walking forward means only a slower form of the same. The Sahara does not rage. It does not pursue. It simply exists, vast and absolute, indifferent to the suffering that passes across its surface. The men who move through it are temporary. They leave no lasting mark. Their footprints fill within hours. Their voices are swallowed by the wind. Some survivors are said to have consumed the flesh of the dead. The historical record is unclear on the details, and perhaps clarity is neither possible nor necessary. Starvation reduces human beings to calculations of energy and survival. The mind, deprived of water and food and hope, makes choices that the fed and comfortable cannot imagine. Judgment belongs to those who have not walked those same dunes, who have not felt their bodies consuming themselves from within, who have not watched companions fall and known that their own fall is only days away. By the time the remnants of the expedition reach the oasis of Amguid, they number fewer than a dozen. They are skeletal, delirious, barely recognizable as soldiers of a European power. Some will not survive much longer. Others will carry the memory of the march for the rest of their lives, a weight that no distance from the desert can ever fully lift. Of the 92 men who departed Ouargla, only 11 returned to French territory alive. Colonel Flatters's body is never recovered. Neither are most of the others. The sand has taken them, covered them, absorbed them into its vastness. The expedition that was meant to chart a path for empire has instead demonstrated the limits of European power, the cost of underestimating a landscape and its people. The French will return. They will build railways. But the desert will remain what it has always been, ungovernable and patient. Lieutenant Didianos survives the march. He will testify to what happened, provide accounts that historians will cite for generations. But there are things that cannot be conveyed in official reports. The sound of wind over an empty canteen. The weight of a rifle that can no longer be lifted. The moment when the last camel falls and the men stand in silence, understanding that they will now carry nothing but themselves. The taste of blood that is not one's own. The faces of friends who became strangers, who became something less than strangers in the final days. The Sahara keeps no monuments. It erases names. It erases intentions. It erases the distinction between conqueror and conquered, between ambition and failure. The dunes shift. The winds reshape. 100 years from now, 1,000 years from now, the place where Flatters fell will look no different from any other fold in the sand. The expedition will exist only in archives, in the fading memory of documents stored in distant cities, in the oral traditions of Tuareg who will tell the story differently than the French ever could. They will learn, as all who enter eventually learn, that the Sahara does not negotiate, it does not compromise, it offers only two possibilities, passage or permanence. Those who pass through carry something with them that never quite leaves, a knowledge of heat and thirst and the thin membrane that separates life from its absence. Those who remain become part of the landscape itself, their bones bleaching beneath a sun that has watched civilizations rise and fall without comment. The wind moves across the reg. It carries dust. It carries silence. It carries the last traces of 92 men who walked south, believing in railways and empire and the mastery of difficult terrain. They are gone now, scattered across a geography that refuses to hold human meaning. The sand settles, the horizon shimmers, and the Sahara waits, as it has always waited, for whatever comes next.